Did that just happen? Did Zero Two just die? Okay, darling in the Franks. Okay, Studio Trigger. Okay, A1 Studios. I see you. Okay. Now, obviously, some of the things could potentially be a fake out, but really? Of all, everything? Like, okay, I mean, death flags have been there since the beginning, and just like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of death flags even in this episode as well, but I cannot believe they actually went through with it with this episode, since we're about to reach the finale. But okay, so, I mean, with that conclusion to this episode with, maybe Zero Two being dead, there is a potential possibility that this could actually be set up for a Season 2. Hear me out on that. See, we found out the truth about the Klaxosaur Princess in this episode. She was pretty much the last of her species of the Klaxosapiens, and because of her being the last one and all of her other brethren turned into either Klaxosaurs or they turned into energy, she was the only one left. She was the only one that was a Klaxosaur sapien, or a Klaxosapien. And so because of that, that means that when she died in this episode, technically, her species died. It was over. But she stayed around for millions upon millions of years just to be able to fight back against Verm. So this basically establishes the fact that she's always been lonely for a very long time to hold up the role of being able to save the planet. And now if everyone indeed did just die, that lets us know that maybe Hero is the only one left, and he might have to carry on the legacy similar to what, happened to the Klaxosapiens. And I wonder if that's what Trigger and A1 is trying to set up here. That they're trying to set up Hero to be in the exact same spot as how the, Klaxosaur Princess was in this episode and previous episodes. That would be very interesting if that's where they want to take the story. Because, think about it. The whole thing with Hero, he has horns. That entire part hasn't fully been clarified. I mean, we could assume that it's thanks to the blood from, Zero Two, which I'll get into Zero Two in a moment, but basically, it's not been clarified, and so for all we know, because he's a genetic anomaly and all that, he's very different. He was even able to kind of overcome Verm in a lot of cases throughout this episode. This does let us know that he's a little bit different, and he might turn out to be the one that has to stay around for a very long time to be able to wait for Verm to return with their full army to stand up and fight against him. So, that's pretty much what I'm saying. I feel like the way the story is going right now, unless somehow they're wiped out in the next episode, then we're going to have a Season 2 with Hero being the last one left, just safeguarding humanity. What that basically means is that maybe all of humanity will be wiped out, and the only survivor will be Hero, similar to how the Klaxosaur Princess was, and everybody else will basically become, machines or weapons to be able to protect the planet. Which, that would be pretty freaking savage if that is indeed what happens in, the future episodes. But regardless, though, the point stands is that everyone pretty much died. Now, there is a potential possibility that Zero Two could still be alive, but not in the same form as she always was. Let me explain that. There's two things you can get from that final sequence. Either A, she merged with Hero, and they became one entity, or two, she merged with the Klaxosaur Princess inside of the Klaxosaur, the mech and all that, the Frank, and she got in it, and basically she is now the mech. She is completely tied to the mech, and that's where she's at. Her soul resides in there, and her body is no longer even relevant anymore. That also could be what's going on here. But regardless of that, though, it does look like, Zero Two's dead, because her body was just lifeless at the end, her horn cracked. A lot of questions there. So the next episode has a lot of explaining to do, and I believe next episode might be the finale as well. I could be wrong there, but I believe it is. So if it really is the finale to the show, then like I said, there's probably going to be a Season 2, because there's just no way that they could properly end the series in one episode, with the whole stuff with, the Verm going back into space, with, their full forces still being there. Because even if, let's say, they kill the fleet that's, running away, it doesn't stop the Verm, forces way off in space to come back one day and fight them. So, there's a lot of potential for a Season 2. And so, I'm very curious about that. And then also, we found out that there's more alien life and all that. I mean, we could kind of already have guessed that with the last episode. But with Verm letting us know now that they kind of made a bunch of species to lose their form, and they formed into one entity like they lost their physical bodies, that means that there's been countless and countless other planets and stuff throughout this verse. And so, there could be other planets that are currently being attacked by Verm that we're completely unaware of. So, there's so much possibilities for the story right now that that, Trigger and A1 can take, that is actually kind of mind-blowing. I'm kind of curious on how they're going to handle it, if they're going to completely rush it and end it to where there could be no conclusion, or if they're going to leave it on a cliffhanger to where, like, yeah, we need a season 2. But we'll see where that goes. 02, Her Blood. I forgot to talk about this in my last episode review, and I honestly didn't really think about it or notice it until I rewatched the episode, and I was told on social media and in the YouTube comments. I was basically told that, Chibi, did you not notice that, 02's blood was red instead of blue? And I was just like, wait a minute, that is true. Like, wait, what? Why isn't her blood blue? That was a big thing. The whole event at the early stages of the show, the reason why Hero's probably messed up and why he, has horns now is potentially because of the blue blood that 02 had. But now looking at her blood being completely red, it raises questions like, what's going on there? Why is her blood red and, why is it not blue anymore? And then we never really gotten a proper explanation to her appearance and why she was no longer red until in this episode, which still didn't get clarified, but she kind of connected herself with Hero in the FranXX, and then she turned red once again. We see it at the end of the episode. So I'm assuming it has to be with her compatibility with the FranXX or whatever, or her next step of evolution or something, because we do know that Klaxosaurs have the capabilities of evolving. That's been established definitely with this episode and last episode, that they can evolve into new creatures and stuff, a different evolutionary path. I mean, they became these machines to fight back against Verm. One stayed as a Klaxosaur sapient, others became energy. So for all we know, basically, what was going on with 02 was the, path of a different evolutionary trait, completely different from what the other Klaxosaurs have done in the past. So 0 was probably becoming a human, which might imply that maybe Klaxosaurs, a certain branch of Klaxosaurs or Klaxosapiens, might have became humans. For all we know. We really don't know, because, once again, that's still not completely clarified yet. But there is one thing that is definitely certain, is that the Klaxosaur Princess, she was around for millions of years. Very, very long time ago, and it lets us know that the date of these Klaxosaurs is pretty freaking ridiculous. So if we're thinking about modern stories of humanity and all that, if we're going by the logic of our verse, like our world today, and apply it to, Darling in the FranXX, then it wouldn't make sense if they have been around for millions of years that they might have been able to evolve into humans and all that in Darling in the FranXX, for all we know. But that's the big point of this episode I just wanted to bring up. Now, speaking of everything else about going on in this episode, number one, there was a lot of conflict when it comes to the Nines in this episode. They were basically conflicted, or they didn't know what to do. They wanted to follow Papa's orders because that's all they've known their entire life. They've always followed orders, and so they were doing as they were told. But now that the chain of command has basically crumbled down, the planet's about to blow up, and, Klaxosaurs are now not really their enemies, but in reality, they were just trying to protect the planet the entire time. They don't know what to do, and so you have the Nines basically going on a rampage, wiping everybody out and all that, and eventually majority of the Nines gets killed off and all that, and you're like, holy crap, just like, it's kind of sad, like, all these characters are basically just getting killed because they don't know how to properly accept and think for themselves. For instance, the whole situation with Verm and what they were doing to humanity, they enslaved them, they indoctrinated them to the point to where they couldn't make decisions on their own. They would only follow orders, and if they weren't given an order, they wouldn't do anything. For instance, what the Nines were doing in this episode, they pretty much died because, they were just born and bred to basically be like that. They were conditioned to the point to where they would listen to what they're told, and if they're not told to do something, they won't do something. So it's pretty savage to think about it like that. So Dr. FranXX, he had a very big moment in this episode, and we actually get to see him die. Like, he legit died in this episode. He got completely just crushed. And I was just like, whoa, that's pretty violent. I didn't think, he would get crushed like that, especially after, the little bit of a redemption he had going on in this episode, which I think was a good way to kind of close his character off. I mean, it wasn't the best way, I think, to handle his character completely, but I think with what they had and the time limits they had, like time constraints to the series Darling in the FranXX, I think that's the best option they had available to them at this moment. I think it could have been a lot better if they would have, spent more time on it, but like I said, they just have limited time, and so they can't handle everything, especially after all the crazy stuff they did in the last episode and now this episode, so they didn't have a lot of time to really expand upon Dr. FranXX as a character. But the big point was, though, is Dr. FranXX, he basically talked to 02 as like, look, you're the clone of the Klaxosaur Princess, and this does establish the fact that most likely Hero could be the clone of Dr. FranXX for all we know, because that's still not been denied whatsoever, but basically he's like, you're the clone of the Klaxor Princess, and, you know, your entire role and purpose in life was to be able to ride the star entity, to be able to use it, and all that. And that was pretty much the main objective of why she was born, and basically the Nines were created from, you know, 02. So now we understand where the Nines came from, which was kind of in our face the entire time, and some were already speculating this in the community, but now it's good to have confirmation that the Nines were indeed just, you know, copies of 02. Instead of just the Klaxor Princess, it was just copies of 02, and that's why they don't have similar traits as how 02 acts in the series. Now, besides all of that, though, getting back into Dr. Frank's redemption, he talks to 02 as like, look, I did some horrible crap to you. I'm not going to ask for forgiveness. I'm not even going to say really any, like, you know, thing to make you forgive me. I just want to say, you know, I did some horrible crap. I acknowledge it. You know, I'm sorry. You don't have to forgive me or anything. I just want to let you know that I acknowledge what I did to you was pretty freaking wrong. And we do get a little information about, you know, Dr. Frank and why he let 02 near Hero in the first place. Because when you think about the entire structure of the story, it doesn't make sense why, you know, they allowed 02 to go near Hero after how apparently Hero and her had a connection, they ran away, and it was going to cause a lot of problems. So you'd think that would be a bad idea to allow these two close together, but Dr. Frank actually went out of his way to allow Hero and 02 back together again at the beginning of Darling in the Franxx. So he tried to be a good guy. He tried to rekindle their passion, their love, because he realized what was going on with 02 wasn't right at all. So that's a little bit of a nice side to him. I mean, he does show that he has somewhat of a nice side, but yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about. Like, the man actually legit, he's the reason why Hero and 02 got to meet together and all that was because he allowed them to meet up once again and rekindle their memories. But, yeah, that's pretty much the episode. I mean, there's some crazy fights and stuff that happen, and like I said, pretty much every character dies. I'm just left speechless right now, because what could happen next with the story? I mean, like I said, Season 2 could happen, but I don't know if Trigger and all of them want to really do that for Darling in the Franxx. And then the whole situation with Verm as well, how they forcibly, you know, turn people into, you know, unphysical bodies, what we saw some of Ape turn into in this episode. It does let us know that they have the capabilities of forcibly, like, you know, turning them into a non-physical form. So that's what they potentially could do to the entire, you know, human race. That's what they might want to do. But that's about it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I mean, how do you feel about this week's episode? How do you feel about that, you know, plot twist? How do you feel about potentially 02 being dead? I mean, be honest in the comments below. I am very curious because holy crap, this episode, it's sad, but I don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of shows to where when we're reaching the final stages of the series, usually a lot of characters can be brought back. So for all we know, these characters might not be dead yet. They could be back in the next episode, but if the characters are in fact dead, you know, props to Darling in the Franxx with holding up with its, you know, death flags that's established since the first episode of the series. But I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode or hated this episode. If you like my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And I love you guys. If you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.